All right, hey everybody, it's good to be with you. Nice to see you guys. Those of you who are new, I just want to let you know, first of all, my name's Jeff. I'm one of the pastors here, and man, excited to be with you guys. I know for a lot of you, you might be wondering, like, what is this place? What are we about? As we say all the time around here, we do not have everything figured out. We do not have all the answers, and this is a place hopefully you can find and take your next step as a group of people. And the best thing we got going in our church is the people of our church. And so while there's lots of stuff that happens, lots of events and programs and all kinds of stuff that we've got going, the best stuff is our people. And so however you can take a next step and get connected with those people, here's who we are. We're just aiming our lives at Jesus. We believe with full conviction we were made for life with him. But that life together is sometimes really complicated. And so we need each other. And that's what that's all about as our church. So we have a lot to cover. Let's go ahead and just get right into it. I'll just kind of point right to the beginning of stuff, which is the best place to start, of course, is Genesis 1:26, which says, "Then God said, let us make mankind in our image and in our likeness, so that they may rule over the fish of the sea and the birds of the sky, over the livestock and all the wild animals, and over all the creatures that move along the ground." We'll come back to that in a minute. I don't know if you guys saw this past week, that there was a Powerball. There was Powerball, one. There was a $1.8 billion Powerball got one, which is crazy. And by the way, there were two winners, and the first one was in Texas, and the other one I think was in Missouri. And I remember thinking, it's like $1.8 billion, and all I could think is, that guy got hosed in Texas. He had to share $2 billion. He was like, at one moment, he was like, I have $1.8 billion. Another person just won in Missouri. I just lost $1 billion. How unhappy he is that he has $900 million. Like, this really is such a drag. Because at one moment he was holding, or she, I don't know, was holding $1.8 billion. Then it was like, I'm sorry, you just lost half of your billions. What a bummer. What is wrong with me that I thought that? I mean, if anybody gave you $900 million, you would think, oh my gosh, I'm so much happier, because this is the happiness I was longing for. Now, 2 weeks ago we started a series called The Happiness Machine. And happiness, what we've been saying, is really, we're kind of putting a lot into the word happiness, I realize that, but we're saying, look, happiness is really about fullness or completeness. It's about sort of the idea of life or abundance. And what we said is essentially, happiness, or the search for happiness, is really about the search for completeness or completion. Like there's something missing, we can't quite figure it out, so we're trying to figure out how to get a hold of whatever that is that we might be complete or happy. We also could say it this way. We know for sure, all of us know this, we know, we were told it, we all know, in light of the super lotto, whatever, the big winning, the Powerball, we all know that money can't buy it. Right? We all kind of know. We think we're pretty sure, but maybe we just like a little more to kind of test the experiment on me. Just a couple of millions will be fine. Just a little bit, but we're not shallow either. We're not. We're really not. We try not to be shallow. We're not extravagant. That's never been our goal. Is extravagance. That's really never what we're after. What we're after is just being comfortable. That's all we're after. We're not. Extravagance is for the rich, and we're not rich people. That's not the intent. Well, let's talk a little bit about what rich is for a second. First of all, if we talk about rich, we can talk about, let's just say if you took like the 99th percentile of wealth in the world, like what's the global 1%? Like how much is that? Because clearly, if you're in the 99th percentile, you for sure are a rich person. Brace yourselves for this number, everybody, $60,000 a year. Congratulations, a lot more of you are rich than you realized. You're in the 1%, isn't that incredible? Wow, this is so great. The problem for us isn't whether or not we're rich. The problem is that we don't feel rich. In fact, probably the best definition for us when it comes to rich is whoever has more than I do. That's all we kind of think about. I'm not rich, they're rich. They can do more stuff than I can do, and we think to ourselves, that's what rich is. And the problem, like I said, is that we just, even if that's true, we don't feel rich. Someone else is rich, but not me. The truth is we feel money pressure and money stress all of the time. Maybe another way to think about someone who's rich is anybody with what's called margin. Leftover income. My oldest son, when he got his first job, he was working at Jack's Surf Shop right here in Doheny. And he had his only expenses where he had to figure out how to pay for his burritos and put money in his Prius, which was just sipping gas. It was a 2010 Prius. And he was like, all he was doing was working at Jack's, buying whatever he wanted, eating burritos, putting gas in his car, which sipped gas. And he just managed to, his life was amazing. And I told him, I remember going, dude, I just want to tell you, you're doing a great job, but you will never be this rich again in your life. And he was like, what are you talking about? I'm like, no, I'm telling you, you'll never be this rich again because you have zero expenses. Everything that you make is essentially margin. That's rich. Now for us, as we think about that idea, no matter what our income is, if it's $1.8 billion or just like, we're rich and we've got $60,000 a year or less than that, no matter our income, if I spend or live at its limits, at the very limits of my income, then I'll have no margin. That's a not rich person. Are you with me? So it doesn't matter what we make. If we spend all the way to the ends of our margin, then we kind of start feeling like we're not rich. Does that feel familiar? Maybe. Now, what we will think, what I think, I'll just confess it as my own. I think in times like that the solution for my money problems most definitely is going to be more money. Like, that's all it is. Like, clearly, there's stuff I still want that I haven't purchased. The gap is the money gap, and that's all I've got to figure out how to do. But all I want to say is this. What if that kind of thinking, just that kind of thinking alone, is actually getting in the way of the happiness that I'm looking for? Just the thinking alone. Like, what if that's getting in the way of the happiness that I'm looking for, but maybe not in the way that you and I might think? First, I should tell you another thing, too, before we go on. A lot of this content comes out of the week 8 of our Rooted curriculum, which is in our life groups. So as we kick off a life group, week 8, I talk about a lot of this stuff. In fact, a lot of people who went through the Rooted experience were like, hey, can you talk about that to the whole church? And I'm like, okay, so if you don't like this talk, blame them, okay? Also, as we talk further, I'll just keep on going. Okay, now here we go. Let's back up to the beginning like we started. Genesis 1:26, let's look at that again. Then God said, let us make mankind in our image, in our likeness, so that they may rule over the fish of the sea and the birds of the sky, over the livestock and the wild animals, and over all the creatures that move along the ground. What I want you to focus on is that phrase, so that they may rule over. That phrase shows up in a lot of different places, but probably depending if you grew up with the Bible or not, you might have seen it in a couple different words, like this one, for instance. Dominion, that they might have dominion. Or as some of you might have heard it, and probably if you grew up in a church, it might be something like this, to be a steward of, or maybe in our language, probably better said, is just simply the word manager, which means we are intended to not be owners. We're over everything, but we're not the owners. Which means, to say it the other way, we're responsible for stuff that isn't ours. That's the way it's set up in the Bible. Again, you may not agree with that. Now, just saying, this is the way it's set up in the Bible. Whatever you've got is actually something else. Let me kind of put a finer point on it. I do crossword puzzles. I mean, I don't want to brag, but I do them. I know it's cool. A lot of people, especially if you're younger, you think, wow, that's really impressive. I do New York Times crossword puzzles, but I only do them through Thursday because after that they get too hard. Friday, Saturday, Sunday, I'm like, I don't want to spend time with that. I want to be done 10, 15 minutes, whatever. That's my goal. So I'm not bragging that I can do a Sunday crossword. I know some of you can. I don't want to talk to you guys, but I do it. And so I just want to show you. This came up a little while ago. I want you to see this. So this is the clue. 23A, if you can see it closely. Here's the clue. See if you guys know what it is. Has the rights to. Someone fill in the blanks. Owns. The answer is owns. Has the rights to. Now, the Bible will say in Psalm 24 that the earth is the Lord's and everything in it. Which means if people start claiming ownership of all of that belongs to God, then God becomes a person who can only be characterized as rival. If we claim ownership of something that belongs to someone else, then for sure there's going to be a particular conflict. If we claim ownership of what belongs to God, then God's our rival. In fact, to summarize at least one part of the Bible will kind of essentially say that the downfall of humanity, the broken down kind of status of the world, comes out of this idea of people believing that they're no longer managers and acting as owners in the world. Now, here's how that downfall happens. Step 1. When people start getting stuff, this is in the Bible, by the way, when people start getting stuff, people start thinking a particular thing. Now, I have to apologize right now to you because I didn't intend for this to rhyme. And it just is so goofy. And if you have to do a little bit of cringe, I get it. So just bear with me. I got a little ahead of myself. I thought, this is clever. And then I read it again and thought, this is lame. But anyway, here you go. When people start getting stuff, people start thinking stuff is enough. Okay, bear with me. Come on, don't lose it. People start getting stuff, people start thinking stuff is enough. Enough meaning like life or things that matter or meaning or purpose or mattering and all of that kind of stuff. Because you and I live in a world that says essentially a number of things. You have to get stuff to feel alive, right? And if getting stuff leads to more life, like a more alive kind of person or a more purposeful kind of person, if getting stuff leads to more life, then necessarily it follows then that not having stuff must lead to a kind of lesser life. Most of us, as we talked in week 1 of this series, are probably asking too much of the things that we try to acquire to do things that they cannot do. Here's Jesus on the subject. It's in Luke chapter 12, verse 15. He says this, watch out, be on guard against all kinds of greed. Now, the situation he's talking about is a guy comes up to him and goes, hey, Jesus, my brother's trying to rip me off. He's not sharing his portion of the inheritance with me. He's supposed to share it with me. And you can imagine Jesus going, hey, you know what? Really, we should talk about that. Who got the money and how do we divide it and what was the agreement and all. He could do that stuff. All he says is, no. Watch out for greed. You might be right, I don't know, but let it go. Watch out for greed. That's his answer. He keeps on going, and this will sound familiar. Life does not consist in an abundance of possessions. Life does not consist in an abundance of possessions. In fact, we will run out of time long before we run out of stuff. Dying essentially is the best proof that we don't own anything. Some of you lost someone you cared about, and maybe you had to go through all of their stuff, and you're like, man, I miss this person. And why do they have all of this stuff? Why do they think this stuff? Why do they buy this stuff? And not only why do they buy it, why do they keep it? Because now I'm just going to figure out what I got to do with it. They kept it, and the reason why, because it meant something to them, which means there's some value in this thing, not intrinsic to it, but because the person has kept it, it's like this means something. It has a particular value. And you're going, I know, I'm never going to be like that. You know, I get that. Getting stuff, it just doesn't give me any kind of meaning at all. Okay, but let me just indulge me for a second. Most of us are driven by the same kind of subtle belief. See if this sounds familiar. Don't raise your hand and confess it. I'm just going to assume it's in the room, okay? All I want, by the way, anytime we start with the phrase, all I want, that may be troublesome. I just want to tell you, all I want, and just telling you might be troublesome, but this is, again, I'll put it in first person language, my language. All I want is to feel like I'm living mostly like the people I'm most like. I'll break that down a little bit. All I want to do is to feel like I'm living mostly like the people I'm most like. By that I mean this. Look, we're not trying to be people who are extravagant. That's not what we're trying to do. When I look at the people who are around me, all I'm trying to do is just kind of be in their ballpark. I'm not looking to be flashy. They're kind of like me. We're kind of like each other. How are they living? I just want to be kind of like them. And I want it to feel like that, mostly. On that note, I don't know if you saw this a couple weeks ago. It was 2 weeks ago. Elon Musk, for a moment, was not the richest person in the world. Check this out. It's made the news. Elon Musk, BBC. Elon Musk briefly lost his title as the world's richest person to Larry Ellison, the co-founder of Oracle. Ellison's wealth surged to $393 billion on Wednesday morning, surpassing Elon Musk's measly $385 billion, according to the Bloomberg Billionaires Index. Now, you have to wait just for a moment. Did someone wake him up? Like, oh my gosh, Elon, bad news. Someone's got more than you now. What does that feel like? I don't know. I never felt like this before. Yes, someone's got more than you, but not to worry. The firm, meaning Oracle. The firm's share price had shed some of those gains by the end of the day, putting Musk back on top, and everybody breathed a sigh of relief. Now, what's crazier to read this, and I don't have a lot of time to go into this, Larry Ellison gained about $100 billion, and then within a matter of days, maybe in hours, he dropped down another $34 billion. I mean, do you think he was like, oh, man, my life changed so dramatically between those $100 billion and the loss of $34 billion. I couldn't buy more islands or couldn't, whatever. I mean, what changed in his life? I don't know, probably nothing, but I imagine there was a part of him that was like, eat that, Elon, look at that. I'm a little bit more than you now. How does that feel, right? Because there's something about us that just goes, I just want to be the same as the people that are kind of like me. Now, none of us are trying to live like we've got $393 billion, whatever that is, right? None of us are trying to live like that. But again, Jesus says, life does not consist in an abundance of possessions. It's really about something else. On the way, not below the $300 billion mark, below that, where we live on planet Earth, it's really about something else. It's just about this. And it's really simple, but we don't always identify it like this. It's just about not being lonely. That's it. It's the reason why you wanted cleats when you were, a special kind of cleats when you were playing, pee-wee soccer when you were a little kid. Someone's story, not mine, someone else I've heard, but could be. But it's the reason why the car that you got was disappointing. It's the reason why all of a sudden, whatever jeans you were wearing, you felt weird because other people were wearing, button-fly Levi's jeans, and all you had was, Sears Toughskins, and it was like, these aren't cool, and it's like, it doesn't matter. But it was like, those are all the things that you kind of held on to while your bike was lame, or everything else that you thought, why is this? I want to be like those other people. I just am trying to feel like the people I'm most like. If you've got kids, it's the reason why sometimes we can't afford to do that stuff, but it's why we buy the things, if you've got kids, we buy the things for our kids like the $500 baseball bat or the $300 baseball glove or the jeans or the e-bike or whatever else it is because we don't want them to be lonely. That's it. Because there's a group of people that have stuff, and if you are in that group that doesn't have it, you don't get to be included. And all of us in this room have lived with that feeling at some point. We just don't want them to feel lonely. And this, more than we want to admit, shapes a lot of our money patterns. We just don't think about it in the background. And it's a really, really powerful force. Maybe your parents did this for you. Maybe you do this with your own kids, but it's that idea. There's a little bit of us that says, look, if there's no money, it's out of the budget, we can't afford it. We all have come to a place at some point where we at least have thought about this as our solution. It's these words. We don't have the money. We're going to buy it, and we'll figure it out. Don't raise your hand. We'll figure it out. We don't know what we're going to do. We don't have a plan. In fact, this is just our announcement that one day a plan will arrive and we'll live with that plan. But until that happens, we're just going to keep on buying things and trying to figure stuff out. And we wind up at some point getting ourselves in a little bit of money trouble or money pressure because we're just waiting for the day when we figure it out. When people start getting stuff, people start believing that the stuff that they have is enough to make them matter, to have meaning. Next, when people start getting stuff, at least the Bible describes it this way, people will start forgetting God. When people start getting stuff, you can see this in the Bible, I'm going to show you in a second. When people start getting stuff, people start forgetting God. At one point, as you may know, Moses is leading a group of Israelites out of captivity into their freedom. They're in the desert. And Moses, he's telling his followers, there's millions of Jews, he's like telling them, the Israelites, he's telling them, listen, we're going to walk into this land. And then he gets all these messages from God he's supposed to give to his people. And here's what God says, while they're wandering in the desert. They're not yet where they're supposed to be. They're still in this place as they approach what's called the promised land. Here's what's in the desert. It says this in Deuteronomy chapter 8. When you have eaten and are satisfied, praise the Lord your God for the land he has given you. You're not yet in the land. It's going to happen at some point, and when you're satisfied or full or complete, happy, praise the Lord for the good land he has given you. Be careful that you do not forget the Lord your God, failing to observe his commands, his laws, and his decrees that I'm giving to you on this day. You may say to yourself, skipping forward to verse 17, my power and the strength of my hands have produced this wealth for me. But remember the Lord your God. It's he who gives to you the ability to produce wealth and so confirms his covenant, which he swore to your ancestors as it is today. He says, look, there's going to be a time where you're going to have everything that you needed, and you're going to want to forget. Don't forget. You're not going to be longing anymore for stuff. Don't forget. And then he says, look, I know that you work hard. You worked hard, and you're going to say, look, I worked really hard. I did this. Look how wonderful I am. And he goes, but wait. God says, you're going to think to yourself, I did this. And he goes, wait. Who gave you the ability to do it? Who gave you the strength of your own hand? Who gave you the ability to do this stuff? It's you who did it. And I know you're going, my boss is a tyrant. You don't know how hard it is to work. This is incredible. I have to put up with so much. And God's going, I know. But here's the reality. We didn't choose our IQ. We didn't choose our special, unique, inherent abilities that we have. We didn't choose our parents, whether they stayed together or didn't. We didn't choose what kind of opportunities. We didn't choose our zip code. We didn't choose whether our parents are there or not there. We didn't choose whether our parents stayed together or didn't stay together. We didn't choose the kind of school we went to. That wasn't really our choice. We just ended up in a situation, and all of those things, whether or not we chose them or not, those things, we can't take credit for those. We didn't choose that. When people start getting stuff, people start forgetting God. One way, maybe it's not the way, but one way to see wealth is as a kind of it's people who have more wealth have more mobility and have more freedom. This is one way to think about it. It's not the only way, but one way to think about it. People who have wealth have more mobility and more freedom than those who do not. So people start seeing, this is how this falls into this place. So like if something goes wrong, a rich person can just solve that problem. They can just go away. They can solve the problem. The poor get stuck in a particular situation. So if that's true though, people will start seeing their stuff as the key to their freedom. The acquisition of more money or more stuff is the way I find freedom, which means I can earn or I can buy or I can acquire freedom, which is equal in so many respects to being happy. When people start getting stuff, people start forgetting God. They don't need him anymore. So what's the impact of that kind of thinking? I'm going to get real practical here for a second. Let's look at a typical kind of budget. And there's more buckets than this, but let's just say there's these five buckets. Spending, debt, taxes, savings, and giving. Let's just think about it in those terms for a minute, okay? Let's also think this is how most people live in that order, in terms of where their money goes. Spending, debt, taxes, savings, and giving. Now, granted, taxes is kind of may come first because you don't want to go to jail unless you're kind of one of those people who wants to live in their van out in a cave somewhere, but you get the idea, okay? Now, let's talk for a moment about debt, okay? Really quickly, when we talk about debt, the average credit card household debt right now is about $11,000 in America. Some of you are like, that's about right. Some of you are like, that seems high. Some of you are like, that's a little low. Because 2 million Americans annually have about $50,000 in credit card debt. Which, if you were to take the average total household debt, not including a mortgage, most households owe about $46,000. I will tell you, I think this is largely due to the fact that a lot of people who are living where we live are just simply saying, we'll figure it out. They get to a place where it's like, I don't know, but we'll figure it out. We got to get this now, and we'll figure out how to deal with it. I have been there. I have been in a place where it's like, I remember trying to pay for things, and they're like, this credit card is maxed out, and this credit card is maxed out, and having to figure out how do I go, I got to sign up for a new credit card with a zero balance for 6 months so I can figure out how to do that, and I've done this move, and some of you have done this shuffle before, and I'm telling you, I have been there. But I did not have to sit in that particular way of thinking about things for as long as I did. There is, in fact, some tools, and I want to tell you, again, no shame about this. If you show up, we took our whole staff through it. We did it. It was great. True Financial Freedom, October 1st to November 9th, Wednesday, 6:30 p.m. If you want to do it, do it. Talk to someone if you're curious about it. Go online, make sure you visit it. But some of us just need a little here's the figuring it out part of we'll figure it out for a lot of us. Just consider it, okay? Now, back to this. If we take a look at this one more time, let's just remove a couple things to make it easier for all of us. And I know you wish it was this easy. Let's just get rid of debt and taxes. Wasn't that the best? How rad was that? We just got rid of debt and taxes? That's incredible. Okay, now, let's just talk about this for a second. What if we've got this whole idea of if this is the simplified order of the way that we live with our money, what if we've got this upside down? Just what if we've got it upside down to that end? We'll come back to it in a second. Matthew 6:21, one of the most famous verses in the Bible. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. Now, one way to think about this, and I think this is really helpful, is to say it this way. My money's direction reveals my heart's desires. This used to rhyme as well, and I changed it because I just couldn't bear it. It was my money's direction reveals my heart's affection, and I was like, too much. Anyway, my money's direction reveals my heart's desires. Now that's true. It kind of tells you where it kind of is. It's kind of like a temperature gauge. It kind of tells you this is where stuff's going. Maybe more like a compass, right? But there's another way to look at it. Look at this again. It doesn't say that exactly. Here's the verse one more time. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. Now, that could also mean this. Not only does it mean it reveals where my heart is intended to go, my money's direction reveals my heart's desires, but it also seems to indicate the possibility that it's shaping my heart's desires as well. My money's direction not only reveals my heart's affection, desires, but it also shapes my heart's desires. Let's look at that budget one more time, right? If this is how most people will think about these big categories of things, and you may not be a person who agrees with what I'm going to say next. By the way, I should also I'll tell you this in a second. Okay, here we go. Get ready for some big news, okay? But what would happen then if we flipped it like this? Here's the big news. The church is not in financial distress. This is not a money grab. This is not everybody panic, we have to dig deep and solve a problem. This is not what this is about. Okay, I just want to make sure we're all clear about that. I'll give you some other things in case you're worried about this. You brought a friend, they're like, we promise we don't talk about money like this all the time. Trust me, breathe, relax, okay, we'll get there. Now, if we switch it around, and if our money's direction actually does, in fact, reveal our heart's sort of desires, then what would it look like to do this? So in the Bible, if you were to try to read the Bible about giving, money, whatever that looked like, inevitably, without fail, you're going to run into a word. And if you've never been in the church before, you'll be like, what is that word about? It's this word right here, tithe, which just means a tenth. Now, some of you have heard of that word. Some of you have had it hammered over your head. Some of you are like, why do we say that? What's that all about? I just want to show you where it comes from, because you can't read the Bible about giving and not run into it. Here's just an example. It's all over the Bible, but here's an example from Leviticus. It says this: a tithe of everything from the land, whether grain or the soil or from the trees, belongs to the Lord. It's holy to the Lord. A tenth of everything that you have been entrusted to manage, you got to give it back to God. That's what that's saying there. Now, the first person actually to tithe in the Bible is Abraham. Why that matters is Abraham lived about 500 or 600 years before the law commanded it, which means he just went, this is something people should be doing. This is just obviously what people would do. So while the Bible has lots of words about sort of tithing, Abraham's already done it long before the law even arrives. Here's another example. At least I should put it this way. Here's why tithing matters, why that idea of giving a tenth actually matters. Here's what it says in Deuteronomy 14. Be sure to set aside a tenth of all your fields that they produce every year, so that, here's the reason, you may learn to revere the Lord your God always. Oh, it's really just about realigning where my money goes so my heart's desires are redirected to. I get that this is complicated for some of you. Let me just show you Jesus on the subject to kind of shed a little light on this as well. Here's Jesus. He's talking to a group of religious leaders, and here's what he says. Woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees, you hypocrites. Now, he's talking about Bible experts, and the word woe is literally, you could translate it as, what sorrow. What sorrow to you, teachers of the law and the Pharisees, you hypocrites. You give a tenth of your spices, mint, dill, and cumin. Real quick, pause right here. So anyway, these teachers of the law they're like parsing out their spices to try to figure out how to give, right? You with me on this? By the way, here we go, quick moment. How many of you would agree that the word cumin is pronounced cumin? How many of you would say it's cumin? And yet the church manages to stay together. Look at that, unity, okay? All right, here we go. We need that right now, okay. But you have neglected the more important matters of the law, justice, mercy, and faithfulness. Let me look at it. So he's saying, look, you guys have taken it really seriously. Way to go. You've actually taken the spices, the mint, the dill, and the cumin as voted by the people. The mint, the dill, and the cumin, but you've neglected something else, what he calls the more important matters. The first thing matters, right? But you've neglected the more important stuff on the scale of stuff, which is justice and mercy and faithfulness. I could do a whole message on this, I don't have time. But you should have practiced the latter, justice, mercy, and faithfulness, without neglecting the former, which means he's not saying all that matters is justice, mercy, and faithfulness. That's not the only thing that matters. Our own doing the right thing, it really matters too, but it's overshadowed. If we make all of those little details the most important thing and we forget the bigger things, that's a problem. And then Jesus gives to them the best diss in the whole Bible, and it actually has all kinds of meaning, but we're just going to stay with it at face value. Here's what he says. You guys, you blind guides, you strain out a gnat from your cup, but you swallow a camel. Like if there was ever a better way of saying you have majored in the minors and you're so blowing it because you have missed the whole idea. You made tithing your spices more important than caring for people who need you. That's a problem. But you should practice the latter, justice, mercy, and faithfulness, without neglecting the former. Now, here's to boil it down. The point is this. What you learn is that the first tenth of whatever it is that we have is just simply to shift the focus from the gift that has been given to the giver of those gifts. That's all that it's doing. We're managers. We've been given all this stuff. And that first tenth is to shift the focus from the gift given to the gift giver. Now, a couple of notes, because I can feel the nervousness, the energy, the like, why did I bring someone today? Okay, I get it. First of all, I want to be really clear. God does not need your money. Okay, God does not need your money. He's got plenty of margin. His family's going to go on a killer vacation. He's got everything that he needs. The refrigerator is stocked. The pool is heated. He's fine. He doesn't need your money. Okay, I want to make sure that's really, really clear. Secondly, you never see an instance in the Bible where Jesus is like, hey, before I start this message, I'm just going to pass around some offering baskets if everybody can throw some stuff in the pot. You never see Jesus ask for money from anybody. God doesn't need your money, and Jesus is never in his ministry asking for it. Now, he's affirming the practice of this idea of giving back money, but he's never asking for it. For some of you, you've been sort of hammered with this idea, and you've been like, wait a second, is this all a big scheme? Is this all, this church has been great, but now all of a sudden, now you're asking for money. I knew it was going to come. Well, hopefully you're getting the picture about what this is all about. I should tell you, this is what the Maguires do. We take the first tenth of our money, and then this is weird for people when they hear this. So the church gives me a paycheck. You take it, and then you give it back to the church. Why don't they just cut your salary by 10%? They could, I guess. But there's something that's missing there. So we, as a family, we take about 10%. We've gone a little bit more than that now. And then we do a little bit beyond that we give to our outreach, which is, you heard Rob speaking a little bit before. We give a little bit more to that, and we give a little bit more to other things that we sponsor and do other stuff in that way. And then that's just kind of how we look at our own budget. And I will tell you, it has never been a thing I've ever looked back on in my life. And I would never ask you to do a thing that I'm not willing to do. So I just want to tell you that, too. And I don't say that because this is like a monumental achievement. It's like this is really what's sort of the baseline for how the Bible describes generosity and giving. And when some of you are like, oh my gosh, I can't do that, I get it. Here's the challenge for everybody across the board, no matter where you are, because generosity is not a plateau. It's not like, yeah, I got to 10%. Hopefully you guys can get there. This is where everything really changes. It's the best. It's like God keeps on challenging me and Amanda to go, is there more generosity that you want to find? Because there isn't a plateau. So I'm going to give you a starting point, okay? Because I get it. This is really challenging, and this is crazy. I got one more thing I want to make sure you hear when I talk about this too. Here's your starting point. Wherever you are now with generosity, and you might be a person who's investigating Jesus, you're not sure about our church. I get it. It's cool. I got you too. Don't worry. Hang on a sec. Just go up by 1%. Just go up 1%. If you're at zero, let me help you with the math. You have $100, that's $1. It's $1. A couple more things on this. Some of you already have your money spent. It's already tied up in debt. It's already tied up in other things. I get it. This is why you need true financial freedom to kind of help you find your way out of that a little bit. Secondly, is this difficult to do? Yes. Yes, I know you're expecting me. It's like, it's easy. It's always easy, and everything works out, and my kids are wonderful, and my marriage is always perfect, and my dog never barks at strangers, and all those kinds of things. It hasn't been that way. And this isn't a money scheme. This isn't like, if you give, God will give you a Ferrari. This isn't that at all. Maybe you've heard of that before. That's not this at all. Is it difficult? Yeah, it's difficult. But difficult is not the opposite of joy. Think of the things that you love to do. Think of just in your head, think of the things that give you the most joy in your life right now. And I guarantee all of them have some measure of difficulty in them. Start with something really simple, like playing golf. I don't play golf. It's too hard. Okay, but golf, surfing, guitar, it doesn't matter. Let's push it a little further. A relationship, a marriage, raising kids, it's all difficult. But it's the best stuff in the world. One more thing on this. The Bible is very, very clear. Do not give out of coercion, obligation, fear, or shame. Every sort of invitation in the Bible when it comes to generosity is about joyful giving. It's not about obligation. This isn't how in the New Testament, the part of the Bible with Jesus and the early church and all that stuff, there's no plateaus, but there's also no coercion either. No one's going to force anybody to do a thing. If you never gave a dime, you're always going to be welcome. We'd never know. Always joy. And if you're a person who's like, look, I'm not giving to your church. I don't trust you guys. You can have my kids for sure. Take care of them. They'll be great over there in the kids ministry. But about the things I really care about, yeah, I'm not giving you guys any money. I get that. But let me just tell you this. Then find something, and this is a little bit risky, but hear me clearly on this. If you're like, I can't trust you, the value of generosity in your life cannot be replicated by any other means except by generosity. So find something that you believe is making an eternal difference in the world and give sacrificially to it. Make changes in your life to make sure that you can give to it, because your life cannot be transformed by any other means that generosity can. It's just like generosity does a thing that only generosity can do. Now, obviously, I'm not saying those two things are the same, the church and that other thing. But if you're like, there's so many obstacles, I can't do it, I get it. Sacrificially give somewhere else. Increase by 1%. I'll leave you with this. One pastor writes to another in the early church, he just says, this is how you ought to think about this. He says, Paul says to a guy named Timothy, he says this in 1 Timothy 6, command those who are rich in this present world not to be arrogant, nor to put their hope in wealth, which is so uncertain, but to put their hope in God, who richly provides us with everything for our enjoyment. Command them to do good and to be rich in good deeds and to be generous and willing to share. In this way, they'll lay up a treasure for themselves as a firm foundation for the coming age, so that they may take hold of the life that is truly life, or in our language, that they might take hold of what is truly happiness. Maybe what's missing. Maybe the thing that's missing for a lot of us isn't some other thing we can acquire. That thing that we're trying to figure out, how is it that we can find happiness or fulfillment or wholeness or whatever that is. Maybe the thing that's missing isn't what we can get, but what we can give away. Let's pray together. Jesus, as we think about you, we think about the fear and the frustration and the stress of so much of what our own money comes to. And we need help. Sometimes, Father, we're obsessed about getting more. Sometimes, Father, we're just under the impression that there is not going to be enough. Father, would you remind us that you're the giver of good gifts and that you've entrusted us as managers and not owners? So, Father, as we reflect on your own generosity, consider what it might look like for us to move into it with a new kind of courage and a new faith, and might our heart and our desires be aimed more directly at you. Father, would you speak to us now as we get a chance to respond? Grateful for your generosity in our lives. And so, Jesus, it's in your name that we pray. Amen.